I wanted to ask you that, Michael. One of the just questions that I kind of jotted down, today is, I mean, it's funny, Vinesh had said, the United States, we went and broke things in India years ago, and now we're kind of, and we broke things with hemp and cannabis in the first place, decades ago, and now U.S. is kind of coming back and fixing it, and we can see that fix happening, in the United States, in places like Colorado and where I live in Washington, especially. I mean, unbelievable what the hemp and cannabis industry is doing here in terms of just skyrocketing economies and tax revenue, funding schools and community centers. I mean, it's mind blowing to watch. But at the same time that we're seeing all these incredible benefits happening in the United States from the growth of the hemp and cannabis industry, the legalization of cannabis, all these different things. I'm sure we've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and you've been there, every step of the way, going back, over 20 years now. Can you speak to some of the learning curve that you saw? Can you speak to some of the stumbling and mistakes, and hiccups that were made in the United States that India could avoid? If people in India, if authorities in India, different, political world of India started to say, gosh, yeah, there really is an opportunity here. We want to help also, support moving the hemp industry further in India. What's some key learning that you can speak to that's like, hey, we goof this up, but you can learn from our mistakes,
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say a couple things. Number one, I'd say make sure that the policy does have a focus so that where the smaller farmers do have a seat at that table. We have a tendency in the United States in the view of we often break things where we go in and we get big fast, and we tend to run over a lot of people and folks as we're building industries, and we've got a history of that. And it's very difficult in the United States to say, well, we need a quota. We need half these licenses that are going out, to go to small farms, beginning farmers. We've gotten away from what made us great at one time, which was our middle class, our small and middle-sized farms that built these rural communities, and we have really gotten policy has moved away from that. So I think we're going to see a big push over the next 4 years as we get policy to make sure that that everybody has a seat at this table. I'll give you an example. Another example is one we're working very closely with is the U.S. black farmers who have been disenfranchised, since the Civil War. We had a 1.2 million black farmers 100 years ago, and we're down to less than 100,000 today, and arguably about 45,000. And then the Latino farmers as well, and the women that are getting into agriculture. There's a lot of exciting things going on in these small communities that have been so disenfranchised. So we're really trying to put a focus on them. And for us right now, because it's hard to have a conversation about quotas or how they kind of get equal access. We're looking at supply chains where, somebody, many of our corporations need, in their social responsibility reports, need to show their support for not only, environmental and social issues. And this is one place where I think we can play. So we are trying to find those, those opportunities, kind of backwards engineer this, in that way. The other one is really the oversight, particularly on the hemp side, but we have, and the United States has led this, excuse me, I'm sorry, there's a lot of smoke out here today. Kind of led this global travesty on what we did, to the hemp plant, and how our leadership or lack of leadership in that area has perpetuated this, these awful things that go on at the regulatory level. So I think that as we start to have grown-up discussions, I'd like to call them, about regulatory framework, that we let science drive this. The 0.3 level is ludicrous. It was never meant to be a global standard. It was You know, it was just
Really?
a number that was pulled out of the air to something to differentiate between marijuana and hemp in research purposes, and it became a standard. And I have been in meetings in DC with regulatory folks who would say, well, you know, that their internal research and what they see would lead them to the 1% standard would and should be the standard.
That's interesting. And for anyone in the audience, sorry to interrupt you, Michael. I just want to make sure that the folks watching in India are clear. So what he's speaking to here is the legal threshold of THC.
Yeah.
THC is the molecule that scares everybody, right? Psychotropic, it's a drug, it'll get you high, run away.
Reefer madness.
So in the United States and Vinesh in India too, it's also 0.3%, correct, or less?
It's 0.5 actually in India.
It's 0.5. It's a little higher.
You get away with that.
Interesting.
Okay. So you should be telling me something about policy.
so again, for the folks in India, for a CBD product, a hemp extract product to be legal, to not be considered marijuana, it has to have, the lab result when the properties of when the plant is taken to a lab and analyzed, it has to have less than, in the United States, it has to have less than 0.3% THC in its phyto compounds. And I guess in India, it's less than 0.5%.
I would like to correct you there. Actually in India, and so this is very interesting, Michael. Cannabis is actually legal in India. So you can we sell on our website Vijaya oil regularly, which is basically cold pressed cannabis with THC. So it's like 1:1, 1:4 with the ratio, right? Different ratios of THC and CBD. Interestingly, there is a bit of questionable legality on CBD isolate, but not cannabis oil itself. So it falls within the Ayurveda